For thousands of years, the image of hell has been tied to a single figure, Satan, the rebel, the tempter, the enemy of God. But there is one thing most believers have never been told, or perhaps, something that has been deliberately hidden behind the pages of mainstream scripture. Satan is not alone. Hell has a hierarchy. There is a court in the shadows, a hidden realm ruled by 7 ancient beings, each embodying one of humanity's original sins. They are known as the 7 princes of hell. Not one, but 7 entities hold dominion over the dark. Each one is the personification of a deadly sin, a spiritual disease flowing through the veins of humanity since the beginning of time. Lucifer, pride. Mammon, greed. Asmodeus, lust. Leviathan, envy. Beelzebub, gluttony. Satan, wrath. Belphegor, sloth. But the true terror does not lie in who they are. It lies in how they still operate, silently weaving their influence into the fabric of modern society. No flames. No torture. No screaming souls in burning pits. Just whispers. Suggestions. And the quiet, willing fall of man. So the question remains. Which of these 7 is the strongest? Could there be a force even greater than Satan, one the canonical Bible never dared to name? And if hell has a hierarchy, then is there a true throne, hidden in plain sight, behind the mask of Satan? In this video, we'll trace ancient clues, from the Book of Enoch, Tobit, to medieval occult manuscripts, to uncover the true identities of each prince of hell. We'll compare the silence of Scripture with the obsessions of human history. And more importantly, we will confront a terrifying possibility. The strongest among the 7 may not need to sit on a throne, because he already sits within us. The 7 princes of hell, the order of darkness. When we think of hell, most picture a land of fire and torment, where Satan sits upon an iron throne surrounded by the damned. But if we set aside that classic image, if we dig deeper into the layers of ancient theology, into the texts rejected by the church, into the faded ink of medieval grimoires, a far more terrifying truth begins to emerge. Satan is not alone. And hell is not chaos. There is a system that operates in the shadows. A hidden order. A dark court that mirrors the kingdom of heaven. Composed of 7 ancient beings, each representing a primordial sin of mankind. These are not mere abstract symbols. In occult texts like the Dictionnaire Infernal or the Lesser Key of Solomon, they are named, ranked, and given roles, functioning like governors under the ruling power of hell. This hierarchy is not recorded in the canonical Bible. Yet over time, it has crept into the human psyche. A dark reflection of the 7 archangels of heaven. They are known as the 7 princes of hell. Each prince not only reigns over a domain of hell, but also embodies one of the 7 deadly sins. Forces that do not merely kill the body, but corrode the soul. By ancient tradition, the list goes as follows. Lucifer, pride. Mammon, greed. Asmodeus, lust. Leviathan, envy. Beelzebub, gluttony. Satan, wrath. Belphegor, sloth. But they do not always appear terrifying. In fact, they often enter human lives disguised as ideals, desires, or simple pleasures. Mammon might be the dazzling markets of global finance. Asmodeus could be a blind, passionate love. Belphegor may come as technology that frees your hands, while slowly erasing your soul. And the most chilling truth: they don't need to possess us. Because in essence, they already are part of us. Parts we hide. Parts we justify. But parts we never truly destroy. Why do we cling to pride, knowing it poisons us? Why do we keep chasing lust, wealth, apathy, knowing they hollow us out? Perhaps because every person lives under the influence of at least one of these princes. Whether in thought, in habit, or within the very social systems we uphold. And then, a darker question rises. If there are 7 princes, who among them holds the true power? Is it Lucifer, the so-called son of the morning? Is it Beelzebub, once called the Lord of Flies and possibly Hell's vice-regent? Or could it be Satan himself, a name that, paradoxically, sometimes simply means, the accuser? A being who may even be sent by God in certain texts? No one knows for certain. Because in the realm of darkness, power does not always rest on a throne. It lies in the ability to pull man away from light, while letting him believe he's still walking toward it. That is the true nature of hell. No fire. No chains. No screaming. Just the slow, willing opening of a door. Through pride, through greed, through lust and the numbness of the soul. And if that's true, then perhaps these princes were never buried in the underworld. They live among us. Worshipped under different names. Money. Absolute freedom. Personal ambition. Unlimited pleasure. In the next section, we begin with the first fallen light. Lucifer. The one who once stood closest to God. And was the first to say, no. Lucifer, the prince of pride. In the shadows of hell. Among ancient beings and eternal whispers. There is one name that does not need to be screamed to make souls tremble. This name does not immediately evoke fear. On the contrary, it draws us in. It stirs curiosity. As if it holds a secret that humanity has long forgotten. That name is Lucifer, the light bringer. Ironically, the first prince of hell was once the brightest angel in heaven. Not a cursed creature. Not a shadow born of darkness. But the morning star. The most radiant light ever to shine among the hosts of heaven. His name, in Latin, means light-bearer. He was the dawn. The brilliance before sunrise. A symbol entirely opposed to the darkness and fire of hell that later came to define him. So then, what caused such a being to fall? What could drive a perfect creature, one who stood closer to the Creator than any other, to become the symbol of rebellion and pride? Some theologians believe it was because he refused to bow to man. A fragile, finite creation, born after him, yet crowned with divine favor. Others suggest Lucifer gazed upon his own brilliance for too long, and began to believe he was equal, or even superior, to the invisible God. In the book of Isaiah, this fall is hinted at through a mournful lament. How you have fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning. But this is more than rebuke. It marks a fracture in the divine realm. When light tried to surpass its source. When the creation reached to dethrone the Creator. And so, pride was born. Not with a roar, but with a quiet thought. I can be greater than God. Lucifer did not fall alone. He led a third of heaven's angels with him. Those who believed in absolute freedom. In a divine order with no God above it. And when war broke out in heaven, as hinted in the book of Revelation, paradise was no longer pure. The rebellion ended in a great fall. A plunge into the abyss. Where the light was cast down and twisted. Into eternal flame. That is the Orthodox version. But in Gnostic texts, those the Church declared heretical, Lucifer is seen differently. Not as the villain, but as a tragic figure. The first to question absolute authority. The first to defy a system deemed untouchable. To them, Lucifer is not the embodiment of evil. He is the symbol of knowledge. Of free will. Of a light punished not for its darkness, but for shining in the wrong place. And perhaps, that very ambiguity is what makes him so dangerous. Because Lucifer doesn't need horns or bat wings. He doesn't have to appear through blood, fire, or fear. He only needs to plant a single thought in the human mind. I don't need anyone above me. I am enough. I am the center of my own universe. Once that thought takes root, Lucifer no longer needs to show up. Because pride has already taken the throne in the human heart. Lucifer doesn't need a crown. Pride is his throne. And he rules with a sweet whisper. That you deserve more than anyone else. That you owe obedience to no one. Not even God. That is why he is ranked first among the 7 princes of hell. Because his sin, pride, was not only his own downfall, but the root of all human downfall. Pride gives birth to lust. Pride feeds greed. Pride stirs wrath. And in the end, it is pride that leads humans to walk away from God, while still believing they are on the right path. Today, we see Lucifer celebrated in music, in literature, in film. As a seductive icon, even a philosophical one. But the more he is glorified in art, the deeper he embeds himself into human culture. And when we start admiring his rebellion as a symbol of freedom, perhaps we've already forgotten that freedom without restraint comes at a terrible cost. Lucifer was the first prince, the first light to be exiled. But is he the strongest? That remains unconfirmed. Because in hell, power is not only measured by force, but by influence over the human world. And if so, then the next prince we must investigate may be just as formidable. Mammon, the prince of greed. He doesn't shine like Lucifer, but he is worshipped by millions every day, through the very money they earn. Mammon, the prince of greed. If Lucifer was the first to fall, a being whose radiant light was warped by pride, then Mammon is a different kind of darkness entirely. A quiet, practical darkness. One that needs no rebellion, no shouting, no flames. Mammon doesn't need you to defy God. He only needs you to want more. His name doesn't appear often in the Bible. But when it does, it carries immense weight. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus himself warns, no one can serve 2 masters. You cannot serve both God and Mammon. And notably, Mammon isn't introduced as an idea. He is a rival. A living entity. A master opposed to God. The word Mammon, in Hebrew and Aramaic, means wealth, gain, or more directly, money. But it's not just money. Mammon is the spirit of greed. The embodiment of never enough. Of endless accumulation at any cost. Unlike Lucifer, Mammon possesses no beauty, no brilliance. He doesn't charm you with splendor. He whispers something far more familiar. A very human insecurity. That you are lacking. That you must have more than your neighbor. That your value is measured by what you own. And once you believe that, Mammon doesn't need to lift a finger. He's already won. Greed never begins as a sin. It wears 1,000 justifications. I'm doing this for my family. I'm saving for hard times. I want a better life. But over time, need becomes habit. Habit becomes identity. And that identity is Mammon, growing inside you. One coin at a time. One deal at a time. Each time you choose wealth over compassion. In medieval mysticism, Mammon was often depicted as a blind demon seated upon a throne of gold. His eyes burned shut by the brilliance of his treasure. His ears deafened by the pleas of the poor. He doesn't need to see. He doesn't need to hear. He only needs to know that souls are being sacrificed to him through everyday decisions. No blood. No altar. Just a simple faith in money as salvation. And perhaps there has never been a time where Mammon thrived more than now. When everything, from education, healthcare, politics, even belief, can be assigned a price tag. Mammon is no longer a distant spirit. He is the bedrock of modern civilization. He is the measure of success. The engine behind all ambition. And most terrifying of all. He is legally worshipped. You might not recognize him. But Mammon doesn't hide. He lives in your bank statements. In the global rich lists. In the ads that whisper. You'll be happy when you have more. And when greed is no longer a sin, but a celebrated virtue. A sign of drive and strength. Mammon becomes the patron saint of the age. He doesn't need a declaration. He doesn't need rebellion. He just waits for you to bow voluntarily. Unlike Lucifer, Mammon does not need light. He feeds on emptiness within. That hollow space you try to fill. With things, with status, with numbers. But you will never feel full. Because Mammon does not offer satisfaction. He offers hunger. And perhaps that's what makes him more dangerous than a prince. Mammon is not a ruler. He is a broker of souls. He trades salvation for deals with no expiration. Where Lucifer tempts with knowledge, Mammon seduces with price. And the more measurable something is, the easier it is to exchange. He doesn't scream in your face. He whispers. Just a little more. Then you'll feel safe. But that little more never ends. Mammon doesn't just make you lose yourself. He makes you proud of the loss. That's when you stop being human. You become an asset. A figure. A commodity. A cog in his kingdom. And once you've grown used to living in bottomless desire, another entity enters the stage. One who does not ask for your money. Who offers no reward. He comes only to set fire to whatever logic remains. With a flame of a different kind. Lust. His name is Asmodeus. The one who drags souls down, while making them believe they're falling in love. Asmodeus, the prince of lust. There exists a temptation that doesn't stem from money, nor from the hunger for power. It comes from somewhere far deeper, a place where humans are most vulnerable, yet most capable of justifying their actions, love. And when love is twisted by possessiveness, by flesh, by uncontrollable urges, it ceases to be love. It becomes Asmodeus. Asmodeus is a familiar name in ancient lore, but strangely enough, he is one of the few entities to appear directly in Scripture. Not in the mainstream canonical texts, but in the Book of Tobit, a deuterocanonical book recognized by both Catholic and Orthodox traditions. In that story, Asmodeus is the demon who killed the first 7 husbands of a woman named Sarah, on their wedding nights, before the marriage could even be consummated. 7 engagements. 7 deaths. 7 souls taken, not out of hatred, but because he loved her. A love unreturned. A love so obsessive, he refused to allow any man to touch the woman he claimed as his own. That is the nature of lust under demonic disguise. It wears the mask of affection, but its core is absolute possession. A twisted kind of love, in which the other person is no longer human, just an object to satisfy a hunger that has no bottom. Asmodeus doesn't corrupt through violence. He works through obsession. He makes you love someone so much you forget to love yourself. He makes you believe that the body is everything, that flesh is salvation, that touch is proof of emotional worth. And little by little, the sacred essence of love, consent, respect, is replaced by control, jealousy, domination, and abuse. But Asmodeus isn't just a literary demon. He lives in every moment a human being confuses physical intimacy with eternal affection. He exists in toxic relationships, where one person loves too much, and the other is suffocated until they lose who they are. He is the spirit behind infidelity, sex addiction, and the emptiness that follows pleasure. Because lust always promises what it cannot deliver. In grimoires like the Leviathan or Goetia, Asmodeus is depicted as a king of hell with 3 heads, one of a man, one of a ram, and one of a bull, riding a dragon, holding a spear, and breathing fire. This image is not just to terrify. It's symbolic of the duality of lust itself, seductive and destructive, passionate and merciless. The most dangerous thing about Asmodeus is not that he exists. It's that modern society has legalized him. We live in an age where desire is explained as a basic need, where all moral boundaries can be erased by personal reasoning, as long as I'm not hurting anyone. But is that true? Or are we the ones being drained? Asmodeus doesn't need to accuse you. He only needs you to believe that everything you do with your body is freedom, without the burden of spiritual consequence. He whispers comfort when you feel alone, convincing you that a physical embrace can fill a spiritual void. And once you become dependent on momentary emotions, you no longer know the difference between real love and Asmodeus in disguise. He makes you believe you're in love, when in truth, you're only craving the illusion of belonging, even if only for a moment. And that's how he consumes your soul. Not with violence, but with pleasure. Not with force, but with a gentle invitation. If Lucifer is the rebellious light, if Mammon is the thirst for material wealth, then Asmodeus is the nameless hunger, a fire burning within, never to be quenched. Once you allow him to touch you, every form of love can become a weapon of self-destruction. Because love is no longer about giving, but about owning. And once you're caught in that spiral, there will come a moment when you look at the person beside you, and no longer recognize who they are. Just as you no longer recognize yourself. That is when Asmodeus has completed his work. But there is yet another prince, one who cares neither for love nor desire. He comes from the depths of the ancient oceans, from where envy and chaos were first born. He does not seduce you with gold or flesh. He only whispers. Why do others have what you do not? He is Leviathan, the prince of envy, and he will make you want to destroy anyone who reminds you of your own insignificance. Leviathan, Prince of Envy. Among the sins humanity has carried since the dawn of history, there is one that doesn't erupt like wrath, isn't as obvious as greed, nor burns like lust. It is quieter, but far more toxic. It doesn't strike directly, but silently eats away at the layers of the soul. This sin is envy, and the entity that rules it is none other than Leviathan, the prince of the gloomy seas, of the unquenchable desire to possess what others have, even when we don't truly need it. Leviathan is not like those demons who walk upon the earth. He is a creature that dwells deep beneath the waters, beneath consciousness, beneath the moral exterior that humanity wears to exist in society. He does not appear as a tempter, but as a whisper in the heart, whenever we see someone living better, being more loved, or achieving more than we have. That whisper says, why them, and not you? And thus, the seed of Leviathan is sown in the human heart. His name first appears not in obscure mystical writings, but in the Old Testament itself, Job, Psalms, and Isaiah. Leviathan is described as a sea dragon, a coiling serpent, a mysterious creature of the deep, whom only God himself can subdue. He was not created to punish humanity, but to represent chaos, a force of disorder, of that which cannot be controlled. Yet the chaos he brings does not lie in nature, but in the soul. When Leviathan rises within someone, it leads them to compare themselves obsessively with everyone around them. It makes them resent beauty, success, and happiness, not because others have done wrong, but simply because others possess what they do not. Envy is among the most dangerous emotions, precisely because it hides beneath virtuous language. It makes us say, I don't want to hurt anyone, while deep inside, we long to see them lose what we cannot gain. It lets us pretend to celebrate others, while secretly feeling a bitterness that leaves no words. And within that falsehood, Leviathan grows, coiling around the heart, suffocating gratitude, and replacing it with a constant sense of lacking. In ancient Jewish tradition, Leviathan is more than just a monster. He is a symbol of divine resistance, a force created to test mankind. Some Midrash writings even say that God created Leviathan alongside Behemoth, two primordial beasts, one of the sea and one of the land, and that in the end times, both will be slain and served as a feast for the righteous. But if Leviathan is a beast of the end times, then perhaps, we are already living in an era where he has long been unleashed. Because no age in history compares to the modern world when it comes to comparison. Every time you open social media, you see someone more beautiful, more wealthy, more accomplished, and Leviathan whispers, "You are invisible in their world." This pain doesn't make you cry out. It silently carves a void, where you begin to question your own worth. Then you want more than them. Then you begin to hate them. Not because they've done you wrong, but simply because they're not you. That is when Leviathan truly manifests. He doesn't need you to kill anyone. He only needs you to kill your own gratitude. And from that moment on, every other sin is born. Envy is the silent root of pride, of wrath, of deceit, and in many cases, the true origin of violence. Cain killed Abel not because Abel harmed him, but because God accepted Abel's offering. And through the eyes of Leviathan, being loved less is a just reason to destroy the one who is loved more. Leviathan doesn't drive you insane. He lets you rot in silence. He doesn't control your actions, only your feeling of being left behind. And when envy becomes the lens through which you see the world, even if you do succeed, you won't feel joy. Because at that point, joy is no longer the goal, defeating others is the only prize. He is the serpent coiled around the soul, making you believe you're rising, while in reality you're spiraling downward, into a bottomless vortex of inferiority and rivalry. And when you breathe in that air long enough, you will no longer know why you're living, except to ensure no one else gets ahead. Unlike Lucifer, Mammon, or Asmodeus, Leviathan offers no reward. He only needs you to feel inferior. And in that moment, everyone around you ceases to be a brother or sister, they become competitors. You sit at the same table, but always watch who gets served first. You live among them, but never truly rejoice in their happiness. That is when Leviathan rules. And when all human relationships are reduced to competition, when love becomes comparison, when community becomes a race, then the sea has opened its mouth. And the dragon has risen from the deep. But the nightmare does not end there. For in the banquet of those who consume too much, not out of hunger, but from emptiness, another prince will soon appear. He bears the name Beelzebub, whom the ancients called Lord of the Flies, a symbol of excess that is never enough. And when he takes form, you will realize, gluttony isn't about eating too much, it's about never being able to stop, even when you're already full. Beelzebub, Prince of Gluttony. If Leviathan is the whisper that makes you resent what others possess, then Beelzebub is the deep, guttural laugh behind every moment you can't stop, even when you're too full, too tired, too hollow. Beelzebub holds no whip. He doesn't need to threaten. He simply stands there, beside the feast of the material world, and whispers into your ear. Just a little more. You deserve it. His name was once a terror in the Old Testament. Beelzebub, or Beelzebub, means Lord of the Flies, a deity worshipped by the Philistines in the city of Ekron, according to the Book of Kings. Flies, filthy creatures feeding on corpses, symbolize decay and undigested excess. He is not a god of creation. He is the ultimate emblem of endless consumption. In later Christian tradition, Beelzebub was assimilated as a high-ranking demon, even considered at one point to be the vice-regent of hell, second only to, or equal with, Satan. But what makes him terrifying isn't his title. It's the fact that everyone knows he exists, yet no one names him anymore. Because he doesn't need to manifest in obvious evil. He only needs you to get used to needing more. Whether it's food, comfort, entertainment, or seemingly harmless things like attention. Beelzebub reigns over the sin of gluttony, but don't misunderstand. Gluttony isn't simply about overeating. Gluttony is the inability to stop. It's when you eat not because you're hungry, but because your mind cannot bear the silence. It's when you consume, hoard, and binge, not to live, but to drown out the emptiness you fear to confront. Beelzebub is not just present at lavish banquets. He dwells in shopping malls, in phone app stores, in endless streaming platforms. He lives in autoplay, in infinite scroll, in the compulsion to always have something newer, faster, louder, stronger. Not because you need it, but because you no longer know what enough feels like. In medieval magical texts, Beelzebub is described as a colossal being, oozing fluids, swarmed by flies, eyes never closing. A creature that devours all but digests nothing. Forever hungry. Forever unsatisfied. And that is the metaphor for the modern world, where humans live in a state of not enough, despite being surrounded by excess. He makes you consume without tasting. He makes you indulge in comfort without ever feeling joy. Because for Beelzebub, pleasure is not to be enjoyed, but to fuel further desire. Once you live by dopamine, you'll always need a stronger dose. Over time, gluttony has become a normalized lifestyle. No one is ashamed of overeating, overspending, or binging anymore. On the contrary, it's celebrated as living your best life. But behind those well-fed faces lies a spiritually exhausted generation. Unable to appreciate simplicity, because every sense has been overstimulated into numbness. Beelzebub doesn't scare you. He dulls you. And that is the true punishment. In ancient exorcism rituals, it was believed that Beelzebub could enter the body through the nose, through scent, hunger, or physicalized desire. A form of possession that required no persuasion. Just repeated stimulation long enough. And he'll turn you into someone who eats without knowing why. He doesn't need you to sin. Only to forget why you're alive. Compared to Lucifer, Mammon, or Asmodeus, Beelzebub has no ideals. He doesn't debate. He doesn't seduce. He just sets the table. And lets you do the rest. Because he knows. Humans will always choose more, if they never learn how to stop. And once you've grown used to infinite consumption, all warnings, all morals, all signals from your soul will be swallowed whole, like a side dish. But one day, the banquet catches fire. Excess turns to rage. False satisfaction becomes violence. And that's when the next figure arrives. A being who needs no charm or temptation. He comes as an explosion. An armored fury, with no reason and no limits. His name is Satan, Prince of Wrath. And he comes to burn down everything that wasn't already rotten. With your own hands. Satan, the Prince of Wrath. Among all sins ever recorded, there is one that needs no time to fester, no conditions to erupt. It strikes suddenly, like thunder in a clear sky. It consumes both victim and perpetrator in its fire, often leaving behind a wasteland of ashes where no one remembers how it all began. That sin is wrath. And the being who rules over this fire bears the name that has haunted humanity for millennia, Satan. Satan is perhaps the most familiar figure across all cultures rooted in Judeo-Christian tradition. He needs no introduction. No image. He is the very embodiment of evil. But perhaps that's precisely why we confuse the image with the essence. In Hebrew, Satan is not a name, it is a title. Ha-Satan simply means the accuser, the adversary, the examiner. In the Book of Job, Satan does not come to destroy mankind, but to test Job's loyalty to God. He appears not as a rebel, but as a divine prosecutor, still within the heavenly system. Still a servant. Not yet an enemy. But over time, the image of Satan evolved. From a celestial interrogator, he became the rebel king. The one who led the uprising. The ruler of hell. The soul eternally cast out from the light. Yet in every version, one truth remains unchanged. Satan is the embodiment of wrath. Not blind fury, but wrath born from a sense of justice betrayed. Satan's anger is not just emotion. It is action. It is fire. It is punishment. And the most terrifying part? He doesn't think he's wrong. Satan's rebellion was not out of evil, but out of righteousness. He rose not because he was wicked, but because he believed he was right. Just like us, when we are enraged, we rarely think we're wrong. We act out of anger because we feel wounded, belittled, betrayed. And in those moments, justice no longer remains a principle. It becomes a weapon. Satan was born from fire. But his fire did not come from hell. It came from the torch once held by souls who believed, and then were broken. When you feel the world is unfair. When you see the wicked praised. When you try to live kindly, and life wounds you for it. That's when Satan knocks. Not to tempt, but to whisper. Take justice into your own hands. And so the fire ignites. No logic. No evidence. Only one fuel. The feeling of being wronged. Satan sparks wars within the human heart. He makes you believe that forgiveness is weakness. That patience is foolishness. That peace is surrender. He hands you the sword of righteousness. And pushes you into the abyss. Where every act of violence is justified by just 2 words. They deserved it. And at that point, you are no longer the victim. You've become his reflection. A rebellious soul who believes fire can restore what's already been burned. Wrath is the most dangerous of sins. Because it demands no reward. You don't rage to gain something. You rage because you cannot stand the injustice. And for that very reason, wrath can turn the gentlest soul into the cruelest executioner. As long as you give them a righteous cause. Satan does not ask you to defy God. He convinces you that you are acting for God. And that is where truth becomes distorted. Justice becomes personal. And humans crown themselves as judge, jury, and executioner. He does not need to build hell. He only needs humans to build it themselves. From the bricks of unhealed pain and smoldering hatred. In today's world, where a click, a comment, a post can destroy a reputation in seconds, Satan doesn't need a body. He sits quietly. On the edge of the internet. Inside community trials. Between bleeding words on social media. And listens. As humans burn one another in the flames of righteous fury. Wrath is a fire that consumes all moral legacy. Because it always speaks in the name of justice. And if you've ever looked in the mirror. And failed to recognize yourself. Because of how angry, how bitter, how desperate you were to teach someone a lesson. Then maybe. Satan used your hands. Without even asking. But even wrath must one day burn out. No matter how hot the fire. It always fades. And when it does. What remains is something more terrifying than violence. Paralysis. The final prince awaits in that stillness. No screams. No flames. Just a presence, motionless. Calling you back with a sickly sweet comfort. Belphegor. The prince of sloth. The one who doesn't need to move. To always win. Belphegor, prince of sloth. No flames erupt. No swords drawn, no blood spilled, no curses screamed. Only, silence. And in that silence, a shadow slips into the human mind, a darkness that doesn't strike with power, but seeps in through invisible decay. Belphegor is the least mentioned of hell's princes. He does not scream like Satan. He does not shine like Lucifer. He doesn't demand betrayal, doesn't tempt you with lust or gold. Instead, he whispers. That can wait until tomorrow. You don't need to try so hard. Nothing really matters anyway. Belphegor is the embodiment of delay, stagnation, and inner erosion. He doesn't destroy you from the outside, but from within. No need for obvious sin. All he requires is that you slowly lose your fire, your sense of responsibility, and finally, your very self. People think sloth is a lack of energy. But at its darkest core, it is surrender in disguise. You know what needs to be done. You have the ability to do it. But you don't, because you're afraid to face it, because your passion is gone, because there's an emptiness inside you that has no name. Belphegor comes to souls that once burned brightly. Those who once dreamed big, acted boldly, longed to change the world. And then, the world didn't answer. Dreams collapsed. Faith cracked. Anger faded. And you begin to slow down. Just one day of not writing. A week without prayer. A month without calling your parents. A year without doing what you once loved. Until one day, you no longer feel guilty for giving up. You call it rest. You say, I'm just not motivated anymore. But Belphegor knows, you've surrendered. The lazy don't have to lie in bed all day. They can be busy, but aimless. They can speak eloquently, but never act. They can plan, but never begin. And worst of all, they can see life as so meaningless, that they no longer bother to resist. Belphegor is patient. He doesn't need to conquer you in a day. He only needs you to stop believing you can change. And so, day after day, your life becomes a dull copy of the one before. You're still alive, but you're no longer living. In the deepest layer of hell, sloth is not an action, it's a state of the soul convinced that all effort is futile. That's the moment you stop resisting the dark. And begin to dissolve into it. Maybe that's why Belphegor is the final prince. He needs no crown. No throne. He sits among the ruins of the six before him. And waits for you to arrive. To sit down on your own. And sigh. Whatever. That's when he smiles, without lifting a finger. Because you've handed over your soul to hell. With Belphegor, the cycle completes. From pride to sloth, from the first flame to the last ash. The seven princes of hell are not just fictional figures. They are the map of the human soul's path to self-destruction. Each name a fracture in our humanity left unhealed. Who is the strongest prince of hell? We've walked through 7 layers of darkness. 7 princes, 7 masks that hell wears to step into the world of men. But the question still remains. Who among them is the strongest? Who is truly the uncrowned king in the kingdom of the fallen? If we judge by brute force, many would name Satan, the leader of the rebellion. If we speak of divine power, none surpass Lucifer, the angel cast down from the brightest height. When it comes to seizing the minds of men, Asmodeus or Mammon send chills down the spine. Even Leviathan, whose jealousy rots every relationship, or Beelzebub, who feeds you until you die of gluttony, each is terrifying in their own right. And yet, if we look closely, there's one name that moves in silence, never needing a spotlight. And yet claims more souls than any other. He does not tempt. He does not threaten. He simply waits, for you to lose your will. Belphegor, the Prince of Sloth. No grandeur. No violence. But he wins the moment you stop believing you can win. Because the downfall of man doesn't begin at the fall. It begins when he decides to live comfortably within it. Sloth is not merely doing nothing. It is the disease of a soul that no longer resists the dark. That willingly wears the chains of paralysis, despair, and numbness. Lucifer may fall. Satan may rage. Mammon may buy you. Asmodeus may burn you. But Belphegor, he ends you. So if we must choose the strongest prince of hell, the answer lies not in a roar, but in silence. Not in the one who shouts your name through fire, but in the one who makes you forget to speak your own. Belphegor does not fight. And that is exactly what makes him the most dangerous. But one final question remains. If each prince represents a part of our own soul, then has hell ever really been beneath the earth? Or has it always lived inside us? Think about that. Because sometimes, the most terrifying thing is not the demon knocking at your door, but the moment you open it, and invite him in. You have just walked out of the darkness of hell. But have you truly escaped? Or have you only just realized that it still lives within you? 7 princes, 7 mirrors reflecting the deepest corners of the human soul. What did you see in them? A flicker of pride? A whisper of greed? A jealous sigh? Or just, a weariness so deep, you no longer wish to fight? If hell has its order, then heaven has its secrets. And perhaps, in the next chapter, you will meet a being even more terrifying than the princes of hell. One who didn't fall, wasn't cast out, but was sent, as an angel of light. Subscribe and ring the bell, because you'll want to know who truly holds the soul of humanity. And don't forget to leave a comment below. In your view, who truly rules hell? And among the 7 sins, which one rules you? Veil of Mystery will return. And next time, perhaps even angels have secrets.